Hi, I'm Laura and I am from Luton Lives, which is a music promotion group based in Luton. And I've been part of Luton Lives for about 5 years. I started in 2017, so it's probably 5.5 now, coming up to 6 years. And I've been booking shows since I started. Basically, I was brought in as a person to book shows or a booker. So I'm going to talk to you about running a gig. So that goes right from when you first think, I want to put a show on, to the show is finished and I can go home. So, without further ado, let's begin. Running a gig night from conception to post event. First, you might think finding the musicians is the most important thing, but actually, what are you going to do if you've got musicians who want to play and you haven't got a venue for them to play at? So the first most important thing is to find a venue and find a date. You have to secure a date in the diary before you start booking bands. You also need a location, and you need to make sure the venue is happy for you to host the event there on that night. Get the date locked in with them, write it in your diaries so that neither party forgets that it's happening and double books. Find out if the venue already has a sound engineer. If you're looking at a venue that frequently puts on events and you're saying, hey, I see what you're doing, can I get in on that? Chances are they will have a house sound engineer, but it's definitely something that you need to check before you go ahead with it. Otherwise, you're going to end up booking your own sound engineer, and that can cost you £15 an hour minimum, which doesn't sound a lot, but when you add it up, that sound engineer is going to be there for probably at least 5 hours, maybe more. So that at £15 an hour, it really racks up. If you have a friend who's a sound engineer and they have their own equipment and they're happy to do it for a cheaper price, that's fine. I would, however, say if it's just kind of a mates fest, something we call a mates fest, which is just a bunch of your friends who are musicians all getting together and playing a show, then a friend who's a sound engineer is probably fine. But if you're looking to do a more professional show, then I would strongly recommend getting a professional sound engineer involved. And if your friend is a professional sound engineer, that's a bonus. Next, find the musicians. You have the date, you have the venue. So the best thing to do is send messages, either emails, Facebook messages, Instagram messages. It depends on the size, the popularity of the musician that you're trying to book. But you tell them the date that you've got and the venue. Some of them might come back and say that they're not available on that date, and that's fine. The best thing to do in that instance is to say, all right, no worries, I will bear you in mind for future shows, because then it registers interest with them, and it means that if they think, oh, actually, I wasn't free on that date, but say a month or two down the line or even a year down the line, they'll be like, oh, that person wanted to book us a year ago. Let's see if they're doing more shows. And the same for you. Next time you're booking a show, let's say this isn't the last time you do it, you can be like, oh, there was that band or that musician that I wanted to book before and I couldn't. Let's see if they're free this time. If you're first starting out booking shows and this is the first or second one that you've done, I really recommend, if you've got friends who are musicians, getting them involved and saying to them, I want to book you, and then kind of building the lineup around them. So they are either the headliner or they could be the opener. They could be somewhere in the middle. But building a lineup around one band or one musician that you already have can really help you specify which other musicians you're looking for, because you then kind of already have a genre that you are looking to find complementary genres or musicians in the same genre to build that lineup. The other thing you can do if you're booking your friends is you can say to them, hey, I really want to book you. Which other musicians do you like that are within reach that you want to play with? And I will try and book them. This is where budget comes in, because obviously what you're looking for and what they might be looking for if you are asking for suggestions from other people is making sure that you've got enough budget to accommodate everyone that you're going to be paying for. So you might be paying the venue, you might not. You might be paying the sound engineer, you might not. If it's a sound engineer that is part of the venue, then chances are the venue will pay the sound engineer themselves. But again, you will still be paying the venue, probably. Then you have to be looking at covering the band's costs. So some bands will just happily play for free and that's fine. But a lot of bands will ask for money. Usually it's just petrol money, and then the more popular they are and the more well known they are, they'll tend to ask for payment rather than just petrol money. So you do have to make sure that you have enough in the budget to cover the costs of the musicians. You can't just rely on ticket sales, because if you've agreed to pay somebody, you have to make sure you have money to pay that person. A standard lineup is generally 4 musicians. At Luton Lives, we tend to do a 3-band lineup. So we'll have opener, middle and headline. But semi-frequently we have 4-band lineups, and I have a tendency to book 5-band lineups because I tend to book hardcore shows and hardcore bands play shorter sets. So you can kind of get away with it depending on the length of the set. If you're booking an acoustic set, you can get away with having more musicians on because there's less changeover time and the sets might be a bit shorter as well. So once you have the musicians confirmed, they're ready to go, ready to play the show, you have to start organising the lineup. You have to choose who's going to open the show, who's going to be somewhere in the middle, and who's going to headline. If you're booking local musicians and it's just a mixture of local musicians, then you can put whoever you want open, middle, headline. If it's musicians who are a mix of local and out of town, then you might want to think about, are the out of town musicians going to bring enough people to justify them being a headliner? Or should I put somebody local as the headliner, which means more people will come in to watch the musician who's from out of town? That's something you really have to bear in mind when you're organising the lineup and choosing who's going to go where. So you've got the date, you've got the venue, you've got the musicians. What happens next? You're starting to look at organising the show itself. So the musicians already know that they're playing the show, but they need to know all of the details of the show. And you yourself also need to be sure of the details of the show. Most musicians will have an email address you can send information to. If they don't have an email address, chances are they'll have an Instagram account or a Facebook page that you can send a message to. But you can send the same layout to email, to Messenger, Instagram, any sort of messaging facility. The email that I send out to bands contains the following: date, venue, including a Facebook page for the venue so that they can see other events that have been held there, load-in time, so what time they need to arrive to make sure that they have enough time to get ready for the show before the show starts, running order and set lengths, so what time are doors, what time is the first musician on, how long are the changeovers and how long are the sets as well. Sound check information, so they need to know firstly if they're getting a sound check or not, how long roughly their sound check will be, or just when the sound checks will start. The next thing they need to know is backline. How much backline are you providing? Are you providing a drum kit? And if so, how much of a drum kit are you providing? Is it just shells or is it shells and hardware? Are you providing cabs or amps? If not, you need to make sure that they are bringing their own, and they need to know that they have to bring their own. At that point, the next section of my email asks for their lineup details. So I need to know, it's not that important for me to know how many members of, say, a band there are, but I do need to know how many microphones to provide, if I need to provide cabs and how many, if I need to provide a drum kit, if I need to provide a DI box, if they've got backing tracks or anything like an intro, anything like that, that will need a DI box. or a keyboard will also need a DI box. So anything that is outside of the one singer, one guitarist, one bassist, one drummer, anything outside of that, it will need to be put in the lineup details sheet. And so it's really important to request that in the email. And you will find that musicians have a tendency not to reply to the email. They will definitely have received it, but you have to send a couple of follow-up emails just saying, hey, if you haven't sent your lineup details, please do. Because if they get to the venue and you don't have something they need, it's on them, really. But you don't want them to not be able to play. So you do have to have a contingency plan, a spare DI box, some cabs downstairs or an amp downstairs, or they need to be able to borrow it off another band member from another band, for example. That's something you don't really want to happen. So lineup details is super, super important. Musicians also like to know where they can park. At the Castle, which is one of our venues, the musicians are able to pull up out the front of the venue, they load in from there, and then they have to go and park in one of 2 or 3 car parks that we've got around Luton town centre. The last thing that I include is the promotion, so the event poster and the Facebook event page if I've made one. Depending on what type of show you're putting on, you might not need a Facebook event. I know that a lot of younger people don't really have Facebook anymore, so Facebook events are kind of null, but it is worth having because you can gauge roughly the interest. But again, that's something that I'm sure Instagram is also able to do depending on how you use it. The most important thing out of the two is to have a poster, because without a poster you can't share it to your social media, you can't share it anywhere. You need a poster, and it needs to be eye-catching. If you've got an online event, keep it updated. If anything changes, let the musicians know first, let the event know second, and in the lead up to the show, so a couple of weeks before, send the musicians another email and just say to them, hey, the show's a couple of weeks away. Make sure you're sending out the poster and the event to your friends and family, or whoever it is that their demographic is. Prior to the show actually happening, you need to make sure that the venue has public liability insurance. This is something that most venues will have anyway, and if they are classed as a venue and not just, say, a local pub that you happen to be putting a show on in, if they are an actual venue, they should have public liability insurance. But it's something worth checking. You also need to have a look around, be sure of all of the health and safety things, the fire exits, anything that you would assume you'd have to do in a professional setting where you're going to be allowing multiple people in for an event that you've put on. You need to be aware of all of the surrounding legal stuff. Because I'm part of a group, we have dedicated people who do that. So I know that stuff is taken care of because I know the people who are taking care of it, and I know that they are taking care of it. So you've reached the date of the show. On the night, you will need a minimum of 1 sound engineer, 1 door staff if you're charging for the show. If you're not, it's less important, but it is good to have somebody on security. If the venue provides security, then you don't need to worry about that. 1 stage manager, so that is somebody who can set up the stage. It's also somebody who can run on and fix something if, say, a cable stops working or a cable gets pulled out or a cymbal stand falls over. Anything like that happens on the stage either during the set or in between sets. You need someone that knows what they're doing and they can jump on, fix it and jump off again. And 1 kind of person who oversees the night. Generally, that would be you, the person that's booking the show. If you can get you and a mate doing that, just to have extra eyes around, making sure people are enjoying themselves and making sure the night's running smoothly, that's even better. The more people that you have helping you, the better the night will run for you and for the bands and everyone involved. So I advise getting to the venue at least an hour before the bands or the musicians are due to arrive. So if your musicians are arriving at 5:30, get there minimum at 4:30, but I would recommend getting there at 4, an hour and a half beforehand. The amount of time that you need to set up will depend on how experienced you are with setting the venue up, how familiar you are with the venue, and how familiar you are with the equipment that you're setting up. As I said, I've been part of Luton Lives for 5 years, and I can now set up the entire room apart from the desk in under an hour by myself. I didn't used to be able to do this. I can only do it because I've been doing it for so long. It's also because we've streamlined our equipment, so I'm not having to bring big speakers up anymore. A lot of the wiring is already in place, so really all I'm bringing up is monitors, microphone stands, cables, and maybe the drum kit and the cabs. The musicians will arrive roughly from the time you told them to. Usually I say arrive from 5:30, so they arrive anytime between 5:30 and 6. If you want them to arrive at a very specific time, then you have to make that clear in your email. When your sound engineer arrives, they should have their equipment with them and they should know what they're doing. What I usually do, because I understand the setting up side of things and I don't really have a lot of experience in the actual sound engineering. So when they arrive, they almost say, have a seat, I'll do my thing and I'll call you if I need you. So just be there, be on hand in case they do need you. It might just be a case of running a cable from the desk down to the stage, or it might be a case of, oh, this cable isn't working, can you just go and grab me another one? But it's best to be ready just in case they do need you. When musicians arrive, be friendly, introduce yourself, and try to remember their names when they introduce themselves. I am notoriously bad with remembering people's names, so I usually go shake their hand and repeat their name after they've said it. Even then, it doesn't always go in. If it's a band that's arrived, try and remember who came in with who, and roughly who's in the same band. It will be helpful when you need to know information. If all the musicians have arrived on time and you've set the timings out well, then every musician should have an opportunity to sound check. If they don't, if somebody's late or if it's taken longer to set up or anything like that, the most important thing to do is sound check the headliner and then sound check the opening act, because you can line check anybody in the middle. It takes roughly 20 minutes to sound check a 4-piece band. Sometimes it might take longer if something goes wrong or if they're really not happy with how it's sounding. It might take a little bit longer, but generally 20 minutes is a good amount of time to set aside for a sound check per band or per musician. If they're just one person with a guitar, for example, they will take much less time. They probably wouldn't even take 10 minutes because they'll just strum their guitar a bit, do some singing, and they'll be like, yep, that sounds great. With more members, there are more variables, so there are more things you might need to change. The night should run according to your email, and that's why the email is so important, because it not only gives them a guide on how the night will go, it also gives you a guide to reference. So if they come to you and they say, oh, what time are we on? You can quickly check the email and say, oh, you're in such and such band, so you're on at such and such time. Or you can just have that memorized and be like, oh yeah, if you're in this band, then you're on at this time. If things start to overrun, don't worry. Try not to let it run more than 15 minutes late. But if it does, it's not the end of the world. The only time that would happen is if a band is going on late, or a musician is going on late and they then play their full set. Musicians who are going on late, or experienced musicians who are going on late, should know that if they are going on late, they are then eating in to their set time. If they take longer than 15 minutes setting up, they should know that their set time will be cut short by however many minutes they were late. Changeovers, as a general rule, should be 15 minutes long. If it overruns, that is on the band. The changeovers shouldn't really cause much stress. Experienced musicians know what they're doing in a changeover, and they've usually got it down to a pretty fine art. Every time a musician gets on stage and starts playing, you can breathe a sigh of relief for the next roughly half hour, because you don't really have to do anything. If you've got a stage manager, that puts you even more at ease, because they're the one that's dealing with any issues, anything that might happen on stage. They're the one looking out for it. And what you're doing is you're overseeing, making sure the crowd are having a good time, the musicians are playing well and enjoying themselves, and everything's just going according to plan. Once the show is over, let the musicians pack down their stuff first. Once they are off the stage or out of your way, you can start coiling cables, taking equipment downstairs, and packing everything away. This is where having more staff or your mates helping you out for the night is really helpful, because the quicker you can get everything packed down, the quicker you can go home and chill or go out and party. Coming from experience, after you've booked a show and you've been the one overseeing it and everything, you will be tired and you will want to go home. Make sure you stick around until the musicians have left, unless they're staying out for any particular reason. If they if they're from out of town and they wanted to go out in your town to a club or something like that, obviously don't stay until they go home. But I would suggest don't leave until 11:30. If the show finished at 10:30, for example. Usually musicians are leaving within or up to an hour after the last band or the last musician has finished. Always give them a really friendly goodbye when they leave, and imply that you might see them again, because the best thing to do, or the best thing to hear, is a musician saying that they enjoyed playing in your town so much that they wanted to come back and do it again. Always thank the musicians for playing. Always thank the venue staff and the sound engineer. Make sure everyone has been paid the agreed amount, and put everything back where you found it. And that basically concludes it. If any of you are interested in booking a show with Luton Lives, then you can get in contact. I will put my email at the end of this video. Thanks for watching.